Hey guys, Will here, and today I'm going to be showing you how to paint a Genestealer hybrid. Now this is obviously one of the models from Deathwatch Overkill, as it's the only place you can currently get them, although if Games Workshop were to release them as their own standalone army, that would be really awesome. Hint hint. Yeah, as you can see, I've painted him up. This is like my test model I practiced on. I've painted him up in the Hive Fleet Kraken colour scheme. This is because it's to match an existing army, and that's the scheme I'm going to be working on today, although all of these techniques you could quite easily adapt and adjust to paint it to match your own Hive Fleet or whatever colour you want. It's going to be a fairly simple and straightforward tutorial. You get 39 models in the Genestealer side of the Overkill box, so you're going to want to paint these fairly quickly, and I reckon there's going to be people out there who want 2 or 3 boxes of these hybrids to make a proper Genestealer cult army, so you know you're going to want to do these fairly quickly. With that in mind, it's going to be a simple scheme relying mostly on washes and dry brushes with a few little bits of detail to make certain bits stand out. And yeah, a lot of these techniques I've already shown on my channel. For example, the skin is going to be the same as I used for my Pure Strain Genestealer video, for obvious reasons, and a lot of the cloth and metal work is going to be very similar to my painting an Orc Boy video. So you know, you might recognise some of these techniques, but the idea here is to put it all together in one place, particularly for people who are sort of looking to follow this tutorial for getting their Genestealers together without having to cross-reference to my other videos. So the model I'm going to be using, I've already base coated in Citadel Corax White, but as I've said in previous videos, this doesn't give perfect coverage. You can see if you look closely, there's still little bits of the grey plastic showing through, and so we're going to want to properly sort of re-prime him, and for this I'm using Games Workshop's Ceramite White, the pure white base paint. So I'm just got a little bit of that on my palette with a very small amount of water added. You don't want it too runny, and then just going to paint this on to the model just to make him properly white. Now it's particularly important here to focus on the exposed flesh parts of the model. The cloth, it really doesn't matter so much because we're going to be going over that with other base paints, but the wash, the skin is going to get an ink wash, so that really does need to be as pure white as you can get to help that ink wash to cover properly. And as you can see, although he looked white before, adding this has really brought it up to a new level of sort of consistency in that colour. So I'm going to do that all over. Yeah, I'll just finish that off and then come back and show you the next step. Okay, so now that this guy's properly base coated, it's time to start working on the colours. Now with the Genestealer I started on the skin, but for this guy I think I'm actually going to start on the clothes first. And as you can see here, he's wearing these sort of almost like rags. Sort of the idea is that they're kind of working down a mine. These are like mine workers on this planet that's been infested by the Genestealers. So the clothes that the cultists are wearing are like the remnants of the mining clothes. So they're going to be fairly sort of basic dusty clothes. And I'm going to start off by base coating them in 2 different colours, corn red and XV88. So we've got some bits that are going to be dark red, some bits are going to be medium brown, and there's no real rhyme nor reason to this. You know, you just want to start painting this onto various areas of the clothing as and when you sort of see fit. So I'm, for this guy, going to give him a like a red, almost like, I guess you'd call it a skirt type thing here, do that in red, and maybe some of the like the wrappings around some of his limbs, do those in the corn red, and then do some of the other parts in the XV88. Now, as you go through your collection of these, what you probably want to do, or certainly can do, is to vary these up. For example, there will be bits that, even on two models with the same sculpt, you might have the red and brown switched round, because these are a fairly ragtag force. You know, they're not an organised, disciplined, regimented army. They're a bunch of cultists who work down a mine and have been crossbred with aliens, so they don't really care what colour their clothes are. It's just giving them this sort of reasonably standardised colour helps to make a good looking army on the table, but varying it up actually adds to the realism. So I'm going to do his okay, I guess I called it a skirt, I suppose you'd really call it a kilt because he's a bloke, but yeah, there we go. Get that nicely base coated in this. At this point it doesn't matter about going on to the other parts of the model, because we're just going to go back and paint other colours over them, so you can afford to be a little bit messy, particularly with the first colour. So I'm just going to finish that off and then come back and show you the next step. So now we've got the corn red bits marked out, the next thing I'm going to paint on is the brown parts of the model, and these are going to be in XV88, and just applying that to like these short trousers he's got on, and also like up here where his sleeves are showing through under his like protective gear that he's got on the top. And I'm using XV88 for this, but you could actually switch it out in some places or on some models for Doomball brown, this slightly darker, warmer brown colour. And in the same way, the corn red that you've used in the first part, you could switch out for Mephiston red, because, like I say, these are a fairly ragtag bunch of an army, and if you're having a big collection of them, it's entirely plausible that while they might wear broadly the same colours, they wouldn't necessarily have exactly the same shades or colours across the whole group. You know, you look at a gang of street criminals, they might vaguely, broadly try to fit in, but they're not all going to look the same, and these are really no more organised than the average bunch of yobbos on the street. Yeah, there we go. With the with this Doomball, sorry, XV88, you need to be a little bit more careful than with the first colour, because obviously you don't want to go over any bits that you've already painted. So like when you're getting up to the borders with the corn red, you want to just be a little bit more careful, but it doesn't matter so much if you go over bits that you're going to paint over again in a minute, like on these kneecaps. These are actually going to be silver, but I'm not worrying too much about them getting this brown on them right now, at least. Later on that will matter more. But there we go, that's basically the trousers done. The other thing you want to pick out at this stage is any like pouches. Like here you've got a little pouch at his belt here, so we'll do that in this colour. There we go, and that is about it. So yeah, we'll let those bits dry thoroughly now, and I'll come back and show you the next colour we're going to do. So now that's done, I'm going to continue blocking out the main colours, and the next colour we need is Lead Belcher, and this is going to be applied to all the parts of the model that are going to be metallic. Now, for the purposes of the scheme, I'm doing all of this sort of main bodysuit area that's kind of like the protective gear that this guy wears while he's down the mine. That is going to be done in this silver colour, so I'm going to make all of that metallic. Particular thing to note here as well is around the collar he's got these like lines. These are part of the mining suit, so I'm going to paint all up inside the collar in this metallic colour as well. And as you can see, that's sort of getting onto the head of the model a bit, which is okay because we're going to come back and neaten that up later. This is part of the reason I'm doing all the colours of the clothes before I do the skin on this particular one, because the blocking out the main colours can be a little bit messy here. So as well as doing like the mining overalls or the protective suit, I'm also going to do the sword, because obviously that's going to be metallic. nothing too special, just sort of a low grade sort of steel or iron that, you know, these guys would just make a cheap makeshift sword out of. All of this back section as well is all going to be metal for this scheme as well. Like I say, I'm looking to keep it quite sort of simple and straightforward, the type of miniature you could batch paint, so I'm not going to worry about picking particular bits out in greys and blues like GW have. It's a really nice scheme they've got, but I'm just going for something a little more simplistic, and also in keeping with the High Fleet Kraken scheme that the army this guy's going to join is already painted in. And the other bits that want to go metallic are also the auto pistol, or in some of the models it's an auto gun or mining laser, but this guy's is auto pistol. So I'm going to paint all of that. Again, at this stage, not worrying too much about if we get it on the hands, because we're going to come back and neaten that up once we've finished all of this stage anyway. I mean, this is all going to get an ink wash, so you know, you can afford to be messy. Also got some like explosive charges that he's got mounted on his belt, whether they be for mining or for use as grenades, I don't know, but they're going to be metallic. And also these like grilled knee pads, I'm going to do them in lead belcher. So I'm going to go ahead and finish tidying all that up, because there's still quite a lot of bit of metal work to do on this, and then I'll come back and we'll give an ink wash to this. The next stage is to apply an ink wash to all of the areas of the model that have already been painted, and at this point it is worth noting two things. Firstly, it's important that all the colours that you've already applied are completely dry. If there's sort of slightly wet colours on there, they will give a slightly a bit of a tint to the ink wash and not make it come out the way you want, so make sure it's completely dry. And secondly, it's important to quickly check over and make sure that all the colours you've got are in the right place. You haven't got bits that have splashed onto, you know, another part. Doesn't matter about bits you haven't really meant to paint yet, like the skin and the hands, etc. But just make sure all the bits are as they should be, because once you've applied the ink wash, it'll be very hard to fix the bits you did before it. So you just want to apply this over everything that you've already painted, the silver bits, the brown bits and the red bits, being careful not to apply too much, because it will pool too much in the recesses and create a shiny effect. You just want to put enough on that it does sort of flow into the cracks, but not sort of in big pools of the stuff. And you just want to give this a nice layer all over the model. Now what this will do is it will help to shade everything that you've already painted, and this Agrax Earth shade, the ink wash I'm using, works as a good ink wash for all three of the colours I've used, the XV88, the Corn Red and also the Lead Belcher can all be shaded effectively in Agrax Earthshade, and it helps to add to the sort of slightly dirty feel of the model, because obviously this guy is supposed to be a miner who spends a lot of his time underground, as well as, you know, a filthy alien mutant. So there we go, that's going to dirty him up nicely. And make sure to get all the sort of sticky out bits. Almost forgot the sword there. Need to do that on both sides. And yeah, once this is all applied, it will take quite a while to dry because of the nature of the ink wash. So it is well worth, once you've done this, either painting something else or, you know, taking a break, go and do something else. Give it, you know, a good amount of time to dry. And this is why when I'm working with this type of model, I tend to like to batch paint as well. So while one of them's drying, I can paint the next one. So there we go. That's him all ink washed. So I'm going to leave him to dry now and then show you the next steps. Once that has completely dried, it's time to do another little stage just to make certain parts of the metal look a bit different. And you could consider this an optional stage if you're really trying to get this done quickly. But what I'm going to do is just on certain metal components, give them a wash of Nuln Oil. This will just darken them down and set them apart as being a little, just looking a little bit different from the metals that you've already got, without having to make any real effort. So on this guy I'm just going to do the gun, and these little vents at the top of the backpack, and also the little ventilation pipe down here, and the little like breathing unit there, just to make these stand out a little bit from the other metal components. So just giving them a quick wash of nuln oil, and then once that's dried we're going to come back and give this a dry brush. Okay, so now that all the ink washes are dry, it's time to give this model a dry brush. And for this I'm going to be using Necron Compound. Now, because this is one of the dry paints, it is absolutely vital that you don't add any water at all. I mean, you wouldn't normally add water with a dry brush anyway, but with this one it is particularly important. And you just want to get some light paint on your brush, wipe most of it off on the paper towel so you've just got the tiniest amount of paint left on there, and then just brush it over the metallic surfaces. You want to do this fairly gently because you're just looking to pick out the raised surfaces, give them a little bit of a metallic gleam while still keeping the dirty, darker sections in the recesses. And with this particular model, it's also important, particularly the metal that's close to the fabric parts, to make sure that you're not getting it on other parts you don't want. Because, for example, you don't want a big shiny metallic streak across the bottom of his like overalls or whatever. You know, you want to keep those bits nice and matte as they are. And there we go. As you can see, it's just making the metal parts really stand out and shine, but because they're still dark and dirty in the recesses, they still look like you know, realistic metal that would have actually been on a mining suit rather than, you know, like proper, like shiny metal. So there we go, and then we go around the front here. And what's particularly helpful with this, especially when you're working on these ribbed sections, is to brush counter to the way that the lines run. So if the lines run left and right, you want to dry brush up and down. That'll help to pick out the details more effectively without it smearing or smudging in the recesses. And there we go. Oh, got a little bit on his tunic there. You can just wipe that off with a finger before it's had a chance to properly set. And you don't want to forget the weapons, you know, going along, particularly the sharp edges of the weapon, just to give them a bit of a proper sort of reflective metallic look. And there we go, that is him all dry brushed. Now, one of the other great things about using dry brushing, as well as it being quick and easy, is also because it's a dry paint, it's pretty much dry already, so we can go straight on to the next step. So that's the clothing on the model basically finished now, and next thing I'm going to work on is the skin. And for this I'm going to use the same technique of washing with Seraphim Sepia as I used for my Pure Strain Genestealer, but obviously the first thing I'm going to need to do is tidy this up a bit, because we've got quite a lot of places where other colours like the metallics or the browns have gone onto the skin, and obviously that's not going to cover well with the Seraphim Sepia. So what I'm going to do is just repaint these areas in white. The white I'm using for this is Dead White from Vallejo Game Colour, just because I find the GW equivalent White Scar tends to dry out too quickly in the pot, and I never actually have great results with it, but this seems to work a little bit better. So I'm just going to go ahead and tidy up all of these white parts to get them ready for washing. So I'm going to do most of this off camera, but the idea is just to go around all the edges of the colours you've already painted and just tidy up where the colour's gone onto the skin, ready to paint that part. So I'll be back in a minute or two once I've done that. There we go. That took 2 coats of white to do, but that was to be expected. It's the nature of white as a colour that it will often take you 2 thin layers to get good coverage, but 2 thin layers is always better than 1 thick layer, because using thick layers can obscure the detail. So now our model's ready for the Seraphim Sepia wash. So I'm just going to apply this over all of the skin parts that we've just done white, and this will help to give them a nice sort of coloration that will look suitably alien while still fitting in with the idea that this guy is a human Genestealer prime hybrid. So just apply this over the whole area, and like I said in my Genestealer video, this is a really good way to get the skin done quickly for a large batch of these, or to be honest any Tyranid organism. There are obviously more advanced ways that will yield potentially more striking results, but for a big batch of the things, then just hitting them with this ink wash directly over the white, I find, is a very good way to get your Tyranids done nice and quickly. And yeah, you'll see here you've still got some of the white showing through, some of the original colour. That's why it was important to base coat this with white first before hitting it with this ink wash. Now sometimes, depending on how thickly you apply it, you may need to do a second coat on this. It's kind of up to you to judge it on how it goes. Sometimes I find I get away with just a single coat, sometimes 2 coats are necessary. One nice thing with this wash and this particular scheme is you don't have to worry too much about going over the edges with this, because the Seraphim Sepia is quite a bit lighter than the colours we've used around it. If a bit of it splashes onto another part, particularly the trousers, it really doesn't actually show. This will just sort of cover the white parts nicely without affecting the other areas of the model. And there we go, that's basically all of that. Now if you're worried that it's too light a layer, let it dry before you go and apply any more. If you apply the sort of start thickening up the wash before you've finished it off, it will actually start to pool too much in the recesses and give an overly shiny appearance where the wash settles. So you're better off letting one layer dry before doing a second layer, rather than trying to layer extra ink on here. But there we go, that's about it for now. I'm going to let that dry and then show you what we're going to do to finish off the details on this model. So as I thought, I ended up using 2 ink washes for that, just 2 thin layers of the same thing, and as you can see we've got a really nice alien skin tone on there now. Now the next bit is we're going to start working on a few of the smaller details, and start with, we're going to do this head crest here. Now some of the later stage hybrids don't have this, but the first and second generation and the pure strain do. And I'm just going to paint this with blazing orange. Now this is one of the old GW colours. There are modern equivalents, but to be honest at this stage you could really use whatever orange. And with this, because the details are quite fine on here, you want to be careful not to apply too much and block out the detail, because this is about to get an ink wash in a second, so you need those recesses still accessible. So there we go, let that dry, and then we're going to come back and give him an ink wash. The ink wash that I'm going to use for this bit is Charaborg Crimson, and this is going to be first and foremost applied to that head crest that we've just painted orange, to shade that down and make it a lot more red. Probably have to do 2 coats on that, but then also going to apply this in the little recesses around the joints. Now this is something pretty unique to Tyranid models. They have these like bits where it's almost like the under musculature is almost visible through the outer layer of skin. There's not as much of it on the hybrid models as on the full-blown Tyranids, but there's still a little bit in there. So we're just gently and carefully applying a little bit of Charaborg Crimson into each of those to detail those. And you can see, because this is an ink wash, rather than turning the whole area red, it gives this nice sort of graduated effect and makes the ribbing parts of that stand out. So yeah, just going to finish off all of those bits, re-highlight, reshade that once it's dry, and then show you the next step. Once that wash is dry, it's time to start working on a few more of the details here, and for the next part I'm going to do exactly the same thing as I did on my Genestealer tutorial, and that's to the claws, and I'm going to start with Mephiston Red for them. So just painting a layer of this carefully over all the claws, including the feet, and for this guy the slightly more human hands are going to be done as claws as well, because this is a fairly early stage hybrid. I think he's a second generation. If you were doing this on a later stage hybrid, like a third or fourth, you might want to just do the fingers as normal human fingers rather than as Genestealer claws. But for this guy, definitely want them to be in this red colour to start off with. So yeah, just doing them like that, exactly the same as I did with my Genestealer. And it's important to get a nice smooth coverage with these, because we're about to go over and give them an ink wash as well. But basically it's just, yeah, paint the claws red, and once that's dry I'll be back to give an ink wash. And the ink wash for this stage is going to be Agrax Earthshade, so just going to paint that onto all of the claws, and as you can see this will run into the recesses and down the sides, shade what's already there while leaving the brighter Mephiston Red parts on the raised areas to act as a highlight. So doing that on all the claws. When doing these hybrids it's important to remember they've got more than 2 arms, so don't forget any of them. This shows particularly nicely on the sort of the more Genestealer like claws, where they've got a lot more shape and definition to them. So yeah, there we go. And at this stage I'm also going to just put a little bit on that head crest just to darken it down slightly. We washed that with 2 coats of Cherbourg Crimson earlier, but just a little bit of Agrax Earthshade is just going to darken that down. So that's that stage all done. I'm going to give this wash plenty of time to dry and then come back and just finish off the final few details. Okay, so we're almost there with this guy now. There's just a few more details to go, and the next colour that we're going to be using is Avalanche Sunset. And the first thing I'm going to do with this is just paint it over the little like torchlight that he's got on the top of his suit there. So just painting that in. Don't worry about getting it sort of over the metal bars at this point too much, because I'm going to come back and clean that up in a minute anyway. And for this I'm just doing a really basic scheme for this light, just to keep it simple, nothing too complex with these guys. Also, while I've got the Avalanche Sunset out, I'm going to start base coating the eyes. Again, going to do these for these sort of late generation hybrids, early generation hybrids, like I did for the Pure Strain Genestealer. So just switching to a smaller brush, and then going to very carefully paint in the whole inside of the eye in Avalanche Sunset. There we go. Just trying to be careful not to get it on the surrounding parts, but to fill in the whole of the inside of the eye. And the other side. There we go. So just going to go back and tidy up the light a little bit, because I've not got quite perfect coverage there. There we go. So that's all right. I'm going to leave those to dry, and then I'm going to show you what we do next. So carrying on with the eyes on this model, I'm just going to get a very small brush and some Evil Sun Scarlet, and just put a little dot of that in the middle of the eye, leaving a good amount of the yellow showing around it. So the idea is that the white of the eye on this guy is actually going to be yellow, and the iris is going to be red. On more advanced paint schemes or less or sort of larger models, I would probably then dot the little pupil in black in there, but for these Genestealers I'm just going to leave it like that, so he's just got the yellow eyes with the red iris. Then we're going to clean up the detail on the little torchlight on his backpack, so just using lead belcher for this, and just very carefully painting around the rim to tidy that up. And then across the middle you've got these 2 vertical bars, and I'm just going to paint those in lead belcher as well. There we go. So the level of fiddliness on this is such that you couldn't really try and, oh sorry, just knocked the camera, you couldn't really try and do the you know, paint these in lead belcher first and then try and do the yellow in between the lines. It's best just to accept that you're going to go over them and plan to come back and tidy them up at this stage. There we go, that is that done. And yeah, then we're going to move on to the teeth. For these I'm going to use, what's this called? I think it's a shabty bone, but like I've said before, it's lost its label, so it might actually be Screaming Skull, but I'm not sure. It's one of those. Just going to very gently paint that over all of the teeth, trying to almost do this as an overbrush, so the gaps between the teeth are left left in the darker shading that you've used already. Hang on, it's a bit fiddly to get this on camera. Here we go. Not ideal, but yeah, there we go, looks a bit better on this side. You've got the little teeth you can see in there. Okay, just going to let those dry for a second and then come back and highlight the teeth. So the colour that I'm going to use to highlight the teeth is this Vallejo Dead White again, and this is, to be honest, a step that you could miss out. I'm just really doing it because I said at the end of the last clip I was going to do it, so and it keeps it in line. But actually it's really fiddly to do. It's just a tiniest little dot of white. Hang on, it's not even focusing properly now. Yeah, just a little dot of white, the edge of all the teeth, just to make them stand out. There we go, that's done. And with that, the model is basically finished. There are just a couple of other little bits I'm going to do that are kind of optional extra bits just to make him look a bit nicer. But yeah, I mean, this model is perfectly usable and playable now, bar the base. So just for a few extra details to make certain parts of the model stand out a bit more, I'm going to start by filling in this little black cable, or this little cable here, in black. You could quite easily get away with leaving that in metallic. I'm just going to paint that in Abaddon black, just to give a bit more interest to the model. And then I'm going to highlight that with a little bit of Dawnstone, just a thin line of that across sort of the top of the pipe, just where the light would catch it. So there we go, that sort of makes the breathing apparatus look a bit more noticeable on this guy now. So just going to let that dry and then do a couple of other little highlights. So as I said before, this model is basically done now, and you could totally play him like this, but I'm just going to give him a couple of extra highlights just to make certain parts pop. And the first thing I'm going to do is use some corn red and just go back onto the red parts and just brighten them up a little bit on the edges, almost like a top layer highlight or an edge highlight, just to bring out some of the folds in the cloth in a little bit more detail. So I think I went a little heavy on the ink wash on this part of the model, so this is just helping to bring the colour back up and just add that little bit of extra shebang to it. There we go. And yeah, and this is nice and easy to do. You're just following where the raised areas are that the light would catch the most, and just painting a little bit of line of red along there. And it's not showing up great in this light, but it's just helping to brighten those bits up a bit and make him look a little bit more three-dimensional. And you can also at this stage do a little bit on these like bits of cloth wrapping around his limbs, just again looking for the raised edges and picking them out with just a bit of red, just to brighten the colours up. There we go, and there's one up on this hand as well. Just going to brighten that up a bit. You don't have to keep amazingly neat with this. It's the nice thing about a model that quite clearly quite dirty in its natural environment is going to be not going to matter so much if your painting isn't spot on neat. But there we go, you can just see now that's added a little bit of extra colour to that, a little bit of extra depth. And now I'm going to go and do the same thing with the brown parts of the model as well. And so for these parts, the brown areas, we're just going back to our base colour again, XV88, and once again just looking for the raised edges in the folds of the fabric really, so like along here, along the top there, and just letting the shape of the model guide you as to where to put the highlights. And again, you don't have to be amazingly neat with this. This guy, he's, you know, he's a Genestealer hybrid. He's wearing rags basically and spends most of his days down a mine. You can also do a little bit of edging here on the pouches, just to give them a little bit more definition. And along the bottom of the trousers as well, you've got these nice folds that will be good little places to highlight. There we go, along here. And the back there. You don't want to do too much, just a few little bits to bring out the edges. And there we have it. Our Genestealer is or Genestealer hybrid even, is basically done. I'm just going to base him up now, because a base really helps to set the model off, make it look good, and then I'll be back in a second. And there we go, our Genestealer hybrid is now complete. The basing I did on this was just my my basic basing. I'll put a link in the description to how I did that, because I've got a tutorial up on how I do those bases. And yeah, as you can see, he's looking pretty good. And if you look at the skin in particular, it looks really sort of shaded and highlighted, and literally that's just one coat of ink wash. Lovely thing about Tyranids, they just take an ink wash so nicely. If I just bring this guy in as well, this is my standard Genestealer. Basically followed the same techniques for the skin for him, and then obviously just did the clothes on this guy and more sort of carapace stuff on this guy. And yeah, he's looking pretty nice. So as you can see, they'll go quite nicely in a false together. I've also painted up one of the the sort of higher level hybrids. This I believe is a level 4, and I've used basically the same technique here, just with a few tweaks. For the skin on this guy, I wanted him to look a little bit more human, so rather than base coating it in white and then giving it 2 washes of Seraphim Sepia, I base coated him in like a bone colour, and then gave him a very gentle wash of Seraphim Sepia, looking to still keep some of the original tone. So he looks still not entirely human, but closer to human than he should be. Also, he's wearing boots rather than going barefoot, and these I just did in Dryad bark washed with Nuln oil, and I used what's it called, the medium brown colour that I have. Here we go, Doomball Brown on his sleeves, just to give it a bit of a different look. You know, as I said at the start, you can vary up some of the colours a little bit. Other than that, basically did the same thing. Just a quick note with these hybrids with the autoguns, it's best to assemble the model without the autogun, paint it, and then stick the autogun on. Oh, and also where he's got a much less pronounced head crest here, I just gave that a single wash rather than a base coat and triple wash, just a single wash, because that's less pronounced, as he is much more human than this guy here, who is obviously much more Genestealer. But there we go. I hope you like this tutorial. That pretty much concludes what I'm going to be doing for the Genestealers part of this box, in terms of painting at least, because essentially the techniques I've shown here, although I've just covered a pure strain and hybrid, will be applied to anything out of that box, whether it be the Magus or the Aberrants, anything like that. So you can just use a variation of these on all of them, and should give you a nice coherent looking force. It's one thing with painting a whole army is having them all in basically the same scheme or variations on a theme does help them to look all like one force. Next thing I'm going to be doing with the Deathwatch Overkill is doing one of the Space Marines, and I'm going to use Cassius for that. You can't really see him very well because he's just been base coated, so that's going to be another video another time. Might take me a couple of weeks to do him up because he's got loads of detail on there, and I've got 2 or 3 other projects on the go at the moment. But yeah, stay tuned for that. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.